Today's video is brought to you in part by G Fuel, one of the most popular energy supplements on the market today, and one I've been using during the writing of my scripts as well as during editing of my videos. The flavors I've had the opportunity to try have all been fantastic so far, and I definitely see a noticeable improvement in my alertness as well as my ability to keep my focus on a project, something I've actually had issues with in the past. If any of this sounds good to you and you're interested in getting your hands on some, either to try it out or to resupply your favorite flavor and are looking for a fairly nice discount, feel free to use my code TheDsIEGE and get 20% off your next purchase, while at the same time supporting this channel and helping me to continue to create the content you've all come to enjoy. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested, and thank you in advance for any who choose to purchase using my code. Very much appreciate your support. Without further ado, on to the featured presentation.
Nora here. The Red King is at the dance. But listen, as you drift between the stars, Nora wants you to know you ain't alone. We're all of us a kind of family out here, ain't we? All of us, the multitudes, drifting and listening. But you need to remember, it never troubles the wolf how many the sheep may be. It never troubles the wolf.
Hey all, Siege here. Today I want to go over the Whispers in the Wall quest, first in explaining what happened as well as some speculation I have regarding some of the more subtle information we're given. In truth, this is a very lore-heavy narrative, one we will be pondering the specifics of for a very long time, I'm sure, but let's get into what I feel we can at least understand for now. Let me know in the comments if you could make out and knew right away what Albert said to Lloyd in the upcoming exchange, as it has some pretty significant implications, provided, of course, you understood what he said. Now, if you didn't get a chance to hear it the first time around or weren't paying attention, here's your chance before we begin. Upon receiving communication from Lloyd, essentially the caretaker for the Andrade family on Deimos, we are summoned to the Necrolysk and given this previously hidden information from the construct.
Despite their conflicts, they sleep in peace. But a solitary, dream plagues me. You must understand, constructs cannot dream. And yet, I have. In my dream, one single name repeats. Kalymos.
Clearly this awakening was contingent upon certain criteria occurring, and although it's not specifically stated, the Kalymos dream was most likely set in motion by the events of the New War, as the logs found in the Sanctum Anatomica, the new hub for this update, insinuate that although the Indifference has been active for a time, the actions of the Narmer faction, and specifically those by Ballas, by creating a void portal in an effort to get to Tau, apparently was so spectacular in scale that it attracted the Man on the Wall's full attention, and thus...
The Kalymos Sequence has begun, and it cannot be undone.
The Tenor led deep into a previously unknown area underneath the Necrolisk, leading directly to Albrecht Entrati's cosmic laboratories that at first glance appear to blur the lines between realities, offering multiple areas of incredibly expansive sections of open space, something one wouldn't expect to see in what would be the core of a moon. Further, Lloyd speaks of the Void Tongue,
Master Entrati called it the Void Tongue. He feared it was meaningless, and feared more that it was not.
a language the Man on the Wall appears to communicate in, but also insinuate that they don't really know what it means, which seems concerning. Nevertheless, we delve even deeper below, but we learn all too soon that we have another darker passenger already aboard the ship.
We can only hope the sleeper has been untouched by this vast horror, this great indifference.
Lloyd is adamant that we must find and awaken the sleeper.
A trap? Master Entrati jealously protected his most adored possessions, be they objects or people. Come, the sleeper awaits.
Who turns out to be the human inspiration for our host, the true Lloyd, one of, if not, Entrati's most valued servant.
The Kalymos Sequence has begun? Did he send you? Is he? No. No, of course he didn't. That would be impossible.
This is, well, Lloyd, the original. All emotional centers very much intact. Did you have a good sleep?
Ah, the helpful necroloid my Albrecht had made, so that I might have assistance and company. Perhaps that made it easier for him to leave. Resume your duties, Construct.
Resume your duties, Construct.
Please, follow me.
This is a Tenno, an orphan of the Void, continuing the struggle our master abandoned.
Finally coming to the heart of the lab. The same area we saw during the introduction of this video, portraying Entradi's departure. The real Lloyd is unsympathetic to the desires of Entradi at this point, however, and this is where the quest might get a little controversial for some, but I think it's important to give context to their relationship, because as far as the Orcan are concerned, they are eerily similar and have even been stated to be inspired by the Roman Empire. And in fact, I think many facets of their appearance and behavior are clearly cribbed straight from the Romans, with good reason if you think about how they're structured. Why is this important? Well, in ancient Rome, it would be very common for the highest echelon of society to have relationships with servants, prostitutes, and any who were considered in a lower class than themselves, even and often when they were already married. So, for those feeling this quest is demeaning, given that Lloyd's title, saying that it's Albrecht's servant, is one he seems to embrace, as well as those on the other side that may find this relationship odd or even pandering, consider that this behavior would be quite period accurate given the source material. I just wanted to acknowledge that early in the video to hopefully dispel some preconceived notions in order for everybody to fully enjoy this quest, as I think it's one of the best we've had, at least narratively, for reasons you'll see later in the video. Now getting back to the story, once he's found, his construct informs him of who we are and how important we appear to be, using our newly acquired grimoire.
The grimoire is very active. It is reading you.
And its allegiance to us as proof. Once we're back in the main part of Entradi's lab, we're introduced to the Cavia. The Cavia are animals that Entradi experimented on, sending them into the void in order to study its effect on them, with each muttering what appears to be gibberish and very little information at this point on what actually happened to any of them. Before being summoned back to interact with Albrecht's special antique, named the Palm II, something we're able to effortlessly use, and in doing so, are transferred into the large Orcan-looking humanoid known as a vessel. These vessels are actually human beings, created to combat the man in the wall on his terms, like a giant kaiju. This one in particular is a man named Arthur, one we're able to meet just as we're transported back to 1999. Now within the consciousness of this character, proving that there were in fact Warframes that were able to hold their humanity, potentially like those we are told about in Liberian, but these specimens were transformed into these gargantuan creatures by use of something called the Gray Strain, the one that's responsible for the overgrowth on Deimos, as well as their massive size in comparison to others. By getting close to some of them, one can hear their heartbeat, but on others, it's gone. Furthermore, we have seemingly saddled ourselves within the consciousness of this man in what amounts to a lucid, dreamlike control state, appearing much like how we interact with Warframes. Arthur seems to know we're here, but who's really in control? These will be things to consider for Warframe 1999, as this scene's inclusion was speculated to be actually part of that update, given the context we got from TennoCon earlier this year, but in a nice twist, his confidant stresses the need for finding Entradi by whatever means necessary, and is seemingly overtaken, as are we shortly after, by what looks like the beginnings of the Infested, just before coming into contact with Entradi, at the stroke of midnight, where we find out that
you are late.
once we returned back to our present form, we learned the truth of the matter, that at some point in 1999, an incident of extreme importance occurred, one that it would appear even the man on the wall cannot seem to access. This particular time, we arrived at what was apparently after this 0 point that Entradi was originally aiming for, and in his typical method, the man on the wall appears in his stead, chastising the Tenno, playfully mocking us and letting us know of our failure in a way only he can. This is compounded by a breach in the area where the Indifference is attempting to attack the lab. As we head out to meet the challenge, he makes a quick appearance insinuating something's missing from our grimoire, making another appearance after we've successfully defended the area, admonishing Lloyd for his apparent lack of vision, something that will in fact matter later on. Lloyd is still quite apathetic to the needs of both Entrati and the Tenno and informs us that there was more to Entrati's message, but that while he'd love to help, it's missing a bit of a MacGuffin that one of the Cavia just so happens to have, motioning us over with a very familiar phrase. Now with the proper item in hand, we head out once more in the hopes of being able to decipher the rest of the message, but are met once again by our dark twin. Curiously enough, this time he directs his mockery at Lloyd.
Look at these things lying around, abandoned. Like this, Lloyd.
You are his demon, not mine. I won't listen.
Lloyd apologizes for his emotional outburst in the face of the void, but this action, as well as many before, are starting to show how far removed Lloyd has decided to take himself from this entire situation. Essentially looking at all of this as Entrati's mess, attributing his involvement now as just doing his job, a feeling he even emanates further upon locating the item, even comparing Entrati in a very unfavorable way. Unfeeling, uncaring, cold stone. And with that, we open the door to a tiny section of the 1999 we seemingly experienced earlier and are presented with what I would say is our first actual warning.
You should have left well enough alone, kiddo. It'll never get better if you keep on picking at it.
They say one shouldn't pick at old wounds after all, but by taking the board required for the palm and retreating back to the Anatomica, we do just that, deciphering the rest of the message that Entrati needed us to see.
Arthur? Tenno. Forgive me. I need Lloyd to understand why I had to leave without him. Why I forced him to destroy the device after I had gone. And why I could never say the words he so needed to hear. If I had remained in the Deimos laboratory, Lloyd would never have been safe from him. You know of what I speak. And so I retreated to the only place in history where that entity could not easily follow, to draw his greedy eye away from Lloyd. Tenno, I require your trust. Craft the little Curio whose blueprints you will find in the computer's memory. Complete the Kalymos Sequence. Repair. Rebuild. When the time is right, find me.
With Lloyd beginning to show significant disdain for how events transpired, but finally giving into the emotions he'd been trying to hide at the same time. After all, we're really the first person in perhaps centuries he's even had the chance to speak to, with the indifferent tone he had taken earlier beginning to seethe now. Nonetheless, at both their behests, we travel back to our ship and craft this Curio, and who should meet us there but the man in the wall.
Tick-tock, kiddo. You don't want to be late again, do you?
Reiterating what was said by Entrati, reinforcing the idea of who we were speaking to before, almost daring us to craft the item now. Which of course we do, and it turns out to be the three animals we see in his lab, but morphed into a chimeric form, with the front legs and chest of the Serviolite, the back end and legs of the Avion, and the head of the Nord. And upon its activation, the three creatures, whose speech had been indiscernible earlier, are now able to be understood, and furthermore, they are the key to apparently completing the grimoire, an act the Cavia, as well as Entrati, feel is essential in order to quell the current threat to the lab, and more. We also know what happened to it. given how little Lloyd cared for it, he also didn't worry much about keeping track of it. This place is incredibly big, so I can actually see losing all kinds of things here. And upon finding this page...
How about you give me the page instead, kiddo? Consider it part of our deal.
He wants it too, but for a very different reason, is he needed Lloyd to remain ignorant of what it said. Nonetheless, we grab the located page, and with it, the book repairs itself. This act empowering the indifference to such a degree that it begins collapsing the area with one of the vessels acting in its stead, and returning to the group, Lloyd informs us of the situation.
It takes and it takes. It took my future. It's taking the labs inch by inch. Well, I won't let it take his bloody Cavia!
With a multitude unfolding in front of us as an entity named the Fragmented Tide, we attempt to push the wave of murmurs back, with the aforementioned vessel bearing down and the scene between worlds appearing to be at risk. It speaks a thing we've heard before as well. The exact question we've apparently been asked before. Finding that this creature just keeps reappearing regardless of how much of it we put down, Fibonacci instructs us to present the book to the Curio, and in doing so, we learn of Entrati's final thoughts.
Lloyd, you gave me back my sight, but I would not spare you a glance. You gave me back my voice, but I never spoke to praise you as I should have. For you were my right hand, my strength, my support, my sanctuary. Even when the galleries hurled scorn upon me, your sole desire was to suffer in my stead. On your first day of service, you aspired to be worthy of me. I only wish that I could have been worthy you, my lord.
As the creature, now renamed the Fragmented Suzerain, meaning Overlord, or probably more appropriately here, the controlling entity behind a multitude of previously self-directed units, is defeated. The Tenno notices something in particular regarding the vessel, and instead of trying to destroy it, he transfers into the dormant vessel within the lab and does what the Tenno do best.
Devilry, not their alien darkness. It was something else. It was that somehow, from within the derelict horror, they had learned a way to see inside a broken thing and take away its pain.
Now understand that, like everything else within Warframe's lore, this ending is largely interpretative, but I'd like to think I understood this quest, so while this is speculation until confirmed by an appropriate an official source. To me, it seems as though the Tenno were able to relinquish the indifference that Lloyd had been manifesting since he was awoken, something I believe his overall tone and dialogue appear to stress throughout. The Tenno were able to utilize the words within the grimoire and take away Lloyd's pain, something I think his words just after solidify. For the first time respecting us as the operator, not just a Tenno, his demeanor completely changing. We learn here that the indifference was in some way tethered to an area known as the Strands of Kra. Kra being the requiem where Entrati details how the fingers were in fact cut, and became the driving force behind the lion's share of the technology the Orokin utilized to achieve the universal dominance they enjoyed. And it's interesting that it's associated with time, maybe inferring that the indifference was trapped within some measure of time, but regardless, whatever was holding it back has ceased to be, and our mission moving forward becomes clear to all.
Protect the vessels, repair, rebuild. So runs the Kalymos Sequence. And such is our task. In the version of the past we saw, my Albrecht said we were too late. The solution, naturally, is to arrive on time next time. You keep the murmur at bay, I shall fulfill my role. Punctuality. The Entrati family never could arrive on time without my help. And so, here I am, back to my old role, the diligent servant. Albrecht would have smiled at that, I think.
With us asking a rather concerning question.
He said,
One that actually has a right answer. In the beginning of the quest, Entrati told Lloyd,
My Lloyd, I only wish that I could have been worthy of you.
of which is only one of the three answers. This is very interesting and carries with it all kinds of potential implications regarding the questions we've been answering since the second dream. Was there an actual right answer to all of them?
how do I still deserve your tears after all I have done?
Once Lloyd responds, we're met with one final scene.
We had a deal. The deal was shook. A little handshake, all it took. Though from the deal, the wee child ran.
Yet still, we end as we began.
To me, this says the multitude is beginning to unfold. It would appear that this entity is finally beginning its actual push to get into this realm, revealing itself in multiple ways, and as the creature we fight at the end's name implies, could be conscripting versions of itself that have been created under a singular vision. There are two here. Are there more? Further, he is pulling the petals of a lotus flower apart, clearly inferring that she is a target of some sort, given that she has seen the man on the wall in the past, as well as her being curiously mum about the experience at the end of the new war. But it could also be the same way that Lloyd has, potentially targeting her in the same way he was during the quest, the pull of something dear to us, in the same way it gravitated towards something near to Entrati, giving it strength. Who else has it encountered? Well, I think the reason it's so active now is that its opposition finally moves to oppose it. In the past, both Entrati and Rel decided to essentially remove themselves from the game. Entrati by moving into a time before the Void, with the moon behind him missing all of its Orokin architecture, and thus potentially before its influence, and Rel going dormant within his Warframe. The Tenno, our character in contrast, has chosen to confront it now that we know it exists, picking at the old wound instead of just letting it close. From the context we can glean, this actually appears to make it stronger, but if it's never confronted, what was done can never be undone. And finally, we have the obvious reference Entradi's doppelganger makes, referring to the end of the Loke passage. And at this point, we're left to question, how exactly did they begin? If in fact it is a multitude, could the answer be when they all join together, be it in vision or even in form? It's really tough to say, as it's been stated this is the first part of the Man on the Wall saga, essentially, lasting for the next 5 to 10 years, so this is something we're obviously going to have to watch play out gradually. In the end, what we come to learn is that Entradi may still be somewhere or somewhen before New Year's Eve in 1999, and once the time is right, we will meet him there to discern what method Albrecht has derived in effectively dealing with the indifference, perhaps for good. The labs here, while still under attack, will be much more manageable now that Lloyd's emotional state has healed, and we are offered the aftermath of Entradi's original encounter with the Man on the Wall, as well as how Lloyd became so important with him in the first place.
I wanted nothing but the ease of oblivion at first. I floated ignorant in baths of Nepenthe, a second gestation. On seeing, on speaking, only rarely did my brain flicker errant light across the cave paintings still smeared on the interior of my skull. At sensation's edge, I knew a vague silhouette of Lloyd crooning motherly across the watery distances. The poetry my tongue was too blackened to recite. Too craven to chase death, I awaited it. The father of fears, and yet I was still afraid. The currents whispered, "Coward." I clenched my body into a fist as a fetus must and blinded myself afresh. Stark pain smoked the juice of my living tomb. Why did the saga not end by itself? Why must I still act? Steeped in solitude, I found I could no longer endure my own company. Disgust did the work of courage. I tore the mundane membrane, slid weak and mucosal into Lloyd's embrace. Lloyd nursed me then, tending first to the uprooted ruin of my eyes, then to the mouth, whose grin no longer hid behind flesh. The agony bit deep, but it was clean. Blameless love bled up from me. I had decided to live. I felt no certainty as I donned clothes rough and strange to the touch of new-grown skin. I had none of the selfless zeal of the soldier. The same cursed question still pursued me as it had before. Was I, even now, trapped in the rictus of the wall? The apparatus of logic would never yield an answer. Only resolute action remained. If I must be a demon, let me be an honest one. Let me prove my nature by what I do next. Purpose. Let me leave such blazing footprints behind me as no unclean thing would dare to walk in.
More importantly, though, through this dialogue we learn that Entradi cannot, under any logical conclusion, be sure of who came through, instead vowing to prove who he was through his deeds moving forward. Now the concerning part would be if that concept is fluid, much like the Tenno have exhibited, being able to switch between Man in the Wall and Tenno at somebody's whim. Perhaps more concerning is the epilogue regarding the three Cavia, who now have to come to terms with the burden of knowledge and self-awareness, and one of them in particular, Tagfer, being also forced to deal with quite a bit more in its fragile psychological infancy, which by ranking up the Syndicate shows another mystery beginning to unfurl. But that is for another video, my friends, and this ends my initial analysis of the Whispers in the Wall quest. While I'm certain there's plenty more to extract lore-wise from this place, the overall story to me was quite interesting and, like always, created as many questions as it answered, so we'll have plenty to puzzle over in the future. Good for the channel. It cemented the Tenno as a kind of unique force, one that can win with both love and anger, and the Man in the Wall is potentially even more threatening, given that it appears as though he's multiplying, and as mentioned earlier, offers us a ton to ponder in the coming weeks and months. But with that being said, what did you think? Are you excited for Warframe 1999? And how many of you were surprised to see that part appear in this quest? At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.